Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I know most of you. It's a pleasure to meet those of you who I haven't met before. And thank you for showing up and for wanting to lean into a topic which is near and dear to my heart, which is that of the spring cleaning, and not just the kind where we dust and vacuum and shake out rugs and change our clothes and all those great things, but the internal spring cleaning, the getting into there and clearing out the gunk and the buildup and the waste that has accumulated that is potentially influencing our experience of life more than we might be imagining. Um, and we'll get into a bunch of that today as we go through. There's a very strong mental, emotional piece to our bodies and to our organs, and specifically to the liver, which in the modern world is just assaulted at every corner with microplastics and chemicals and pesticides and all kinds of garbage, toxic garbage everywhere that the liver has to deal with. And so we'll run through today a bit of a big picture. I don't want this to just be me lecturing to you guys. A bit of a big picture view. What's the situation? What are the things that we need to be aware of? What are some of the practical actions that we can take? And I'm just going to share my screen here. That should do it. Portion of screen. I don't know if you guys can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, we see it.
Okay, great. But yeah, we'll take a bit of a big picture view. Let me see if I can see all of y'all. Oh, it's so tiny. Okay. There we go. I can see you. I can see this. If I'm looking down, it's just because I've got the presentation notes down here, and I got all of y'all up here. So we'll zoom out. What's going on? What's the situation? What can we do practically, tactically, at home, naturally, with food, with herbs, with basic things we all have access to? And then we'll have a bit of a discussion around some of these things and share what's potentially been your experience with some of this stuff. If you have any, or maybe you don't, maybe this is the year where you really give some love and attention to this all essential organ that we call the liver. So I'm just going to hop in here. If you have questions as we go through, questions or comments, drop them into the chat, please, and thank you. And we can address those either as we go in real time or at the end. And I think that is it. Again, for those who don't know me, I'll give the very short and sweet version. When I was 18, my appendix ruptured and was misdiagnosed and left me to almost die from basically sepsis. And then I had surgery, cleaned me up, antibiotics, all the things, and set me on a path, a multi-year path of recovery and having to rebuild my health because not only had I had surgery and had my insides cut open and cleaned out and just all kinds of scar tissue and stuff on that level, but all of the antibiotics wiped out all of the beneficial bacteria and totally left me open for parasites, candida, yeast, all these things to overgrow and to leave me at 19, 20 years old feeling fatigued, no libido, no drive, brain fog, gassy and bloated all the time, and really in a shitty place, pun intended, a very shitty place. And it was the best thing that's ever happened to me. One of the best things, besides maybe being born and meeting my partner, because it woke me up to a much bigger reality around health and what we're doing and what I'm doing and the craziness that is our modern society, and how can we actually navigate that and create health and vitality and energy for ourselves. And so that's what I do. I coach guys on the nutrition and lifestyle and life and mindset fronts with a hard or a strong grounding in the physical aspect of that, nutritional, food, supplementation, etc. Okay, spring cleaning. I have a few slides here, nothing too fancy, nothing too complicated, but some stuff to help us out and honestly to keep me on track, because I could go off in all kinds of different directions if I'm not careful. Okay, the liver and gallbladder. When I say liver, we're really thinking liver gallbladder because they're so intimately linked. right? You can't really separate the two, although you can. People do get their gallbladders removed routinely, which is insanity. But they really work together. They are a synergistic pair. The liver produces bile, which is a greeny substance that you may have puked up at some point in your past if you've been really sick or had the wrong food or drink. You get that neon, greeny, yellowy stuff. That's bile. And that helps to both kill pathogens, emulsify fats, so you can absorb them, break down fats, and just serve us in our digestive functioning. And so the liver creates it, the gallbladder stores it. When we eat fatty things or certain things, the gallbladder squirts, squeezes, and shoots the bile out into the small intestine to do its magic there. So I'm really saying liver gallbladder when I say liver, but I'll just say liver if that's all right with y'all for the sake of ease and simplicity. When I write here that the liver and gallbladder is the general of your body, I mean that in the militaristic sense. I mean that in the sense that the general is the one who organizes, who has a plan, who is orchestrating different functions, telling these guys to go there, these resources to go here. It's the one that's mapping the field and assessing the territory. And it does that through many different mechanisms and through a great intelligence. The liver is a very intelligent organ, and it's a very large organ too. I think most of us would be surprised if we could literally like pull out our liver and hold it, because it's quite hefty. It's not some, dinky little thing that's just hiding out in there. It's quite a hefty thing. Fun fact, it's also the organ which is most famous, most readily regenerates itself, which is pretty amazing. You can cut off a big chunk of it and it'll grow back. And it's in many cases the first line of detoxification support, like protection from what we're consuming. And fun little story here. So I've studied a little bit of Chinese medicine, not super in depth. I'm not a certified Chinese medicine practitioner by any means, but friends of mine who have given me this insight over the years. And the whole thing about the liver being the general, that's a Chinese medicine understanding. And it's really interesting because if you think about your own experience or people you know who are either chronic cannabis users, that's one major category that's easy to identify, or alcoholics, right? Or really drug users of any kind where the habit, the cannabis, the alcohol, the drug, whatever those things are, is putting them into a state where they're perpetually disorganized, they're perpetually behind the eight ball, they're perpetually struggling to sort of get shit together and to take decisive action in a direction. So they've got essentially like a inebriated or a discombobulated general, right, who's trying to direct their life. And I've definitely been there, right? I've been the discombobulated stoner general who's just kind of spinning and having a great time, but not really getting much done, not really being very useful in the 3D practical material world. And so if we can think about, am I in a place, right? There's a question to ask yourself, am I in a place where I'm feeling perpetually disorganized or perpetually unable to take action, unable to let go of things, triggered really easily, quick to frustration, quick to anger? These are all can be related to a liver, which is struggling to keep up with the demands of your life. And it's a helpful frame, I find, just to have like, okay, how's my general doing, right? Is what I'm doing right now, what I'm consuming right now, going to give me a healthy dial general who can help me to organize and execute my life? Or am I kind of shooting myself in the foot and I'm going to be feeling this for the next day or two or three or whatever it is, right? And that could be as simple as not sleeping. Like on Monday night, I was up until about 4 a.m., not by preference, but we were driving back from Ontario and we have about a 5-hour drive time plus stops, plus picking things up. And the day just got very long and I got back very, very late. And so that next day, Tuesday, I was not my best self, as you can imagine. And my general had certainly been a little bit under the weather with such little sleep. That said, let's continue on. And so far, in terms of what I'm laying out here, is this helpful in terms of the way we're framing this? Are we following? Is this making sense? Or am I just, a crazy, eccentric rambling? Okay, we're getting thumbs up. I like it. I like it. This picture, I put this here purposefully, somewhat to not to confuse, but kind of just to represent. I don't want you to try and study this. This is the kind of thing you would see in a textbook. If you're studying nutritional physiology, anatomy, these kinds of things, you often see diagrams like this. And I use it as an example because a lot is going on. There is a lot going on in the liver. I'm just going to zoom in here. You may have heard of phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. Again, I'm not going to go super, super deep into these things. I don't think it's practically useful for our purposes. But you can see here, when I zoom in, if I can zoom in, that each side of the liver function requires specific nutrients, right? So these nutrients, B2, B3, what's that? B5, B12, glutathione, amino acids, all of these things are required for your liver to do what it's designed to do. This is partly why I'm not a fan of, in the modern day, for most people, caveat, dry fasting or water fasting for prolonged periods, because you're depleting yourself of the nutrients that your liver actually needs to function. So while there is some benefit, I won't deny that there's some benefit. I would much rather have specific supplementation to support a fasting protocol so I'm not stressing my organs as they attempt to clear the backlog of toxicity. Same thing on this side. So this is what we call phase 2. You can't really see that right there, but I'll adjust that. Phase 2. And again, we need these things: glycine, taurine, glutamine. These are amino acids. You've probably heard of these if you looked into a health food store or different supplementation. N-acetylcysteine, or NAC, that became very popular during COVID. It's great for the lungs. It's great against viruses. All of these things are required. And you can just see it goes quite in depth. And you can find, if you just go on Google and type in liver detox diagram, essentially, you can find all kinds, and just reposition this, all kinds of diagrams, which are quite instructive. So that's kind of what's going on in a very, big picture view. But again, we are going to keep it simpler. What is the liver involved in? Well, there's not much that it's not involved in, which is why we call it the general. It's why it's so essential, right? You can't live with no liver. You can live with less of a liver. You can live with less, in my case, of an appendix or a gallbladder or your testicles, God forbid, right? We can live without these things. It's not ideal, but we can do it. But we can't live without a liver, right? You would need to have a liver transplant or have at least a portion remaining to regrow and regenerate if you want to continue living, because it's involved in all these things. It's involved in digestion. It's involved in metabolism, detoxification, nutrient storage, which is why, side note, people who eat liver, like beef liver, or take, dried liver supplements, are doing it to get the zinc and the copper and the B vitamins that naturally are stored and concentrated in the liver of mammals, ourselves included. Bioproduction, which we talked about earlier, and all of the things that helps to do. Nutrient processing, right? So taking in amino acids, taking in carbohydrates, taking in fats, repackaging them, redistributing them throughout the body. There's so much going on. Hormone processing, right? So either modifying or detoxifying our hormones, right? Excreting that stuff out of the body, and a whole lot more. And so this is just, again, there's so much that it's doing. Let's jump into what are some of the things we might actually see or expect to see or observe in ourselves if our liver is overly stressed or overly taxed. A few things, the big things here: fatigue, right? Fatigue that isn't improved by sleep. If you're chronically underslept, start there. If you're sleeping well, objectively well, and you're still feeling really low energy and fatigue, there could be something deeper. Brain fog, again, another big one. Skin issues. This is quite common, that things will come out through the skin when our internal detox pathways are not functioning at their potential, are not functioning in an ideal state. We start to use the skin as a way to push things out of the body, to detox through the skin, which shows up as rashes or acne or what have you. Bloating, right? So bloating after meals, just not digesting our meals properly, can also be linked to liver imbalance or liver stagnation. Undigested fat in the toilet after you have a bowel movement, right? If your bile is not breaking down and absorbing fats, you're going to see that showing up in the toilet depending on what you're eating. Dark circles under the eyes, that's a pretty common one. You see that mostly, I see that mostly with people who probably are not sleeping quite enough and they really love their coffee, and sometimes it's really low quality coffee. And so it's just more and more liver stress. And then the other one here, which is again more of a mental emotional piece, quick to anger or quick to become frustrated. Side note, when I am drinking coffee or caffeine of any kind, but coffee seems to be the worst, at least for my makeup, and I know that my body doesn't process caffeine or detoxify caffeine very effectively, so it lasts longer in the body and it tends to stimulate more stress hormones. But I only came to this awareness from my partner and living together and doing life together. And when we met, I was pretty big into fasting and fatty coffees, butter coffee, bulletproof coffee, all these kind of things. And she started to observe that when I'm on coffee or caffeine, I become much more of an asshole. I become much less patient. I become very quick to be frustrated or to be angered or to be triggered or to lash out or to become defensive. And there's a direct correlation between, am I feeling calm and grounded and naturally energized, or did I take a bunch of caffeine to stimulate myself into a place of feeling more energized, and hence kind of stressing my own liver, which doesn't tolerate caffeine very well, and seeing that come out it's like there's two versions of me, and people think that we forget caffeine is a drug, and that when we're on it we are not our natural self, I'll say. And I've seen that not just in myself, I've seen it in other people too, right? Who are both addicted to coffee and both struggle with being patient and calm and grounded with their significant other. And there's a direct connection here. We need to pay attention to this. Has anyone had, now I just want to show of hands or put in the chat, have you had that experience? Have you noticed if you're stimulated or you're drinking coffee, that your patience just kind of goes, or is it a so-so thing, or am I the only one here? Feel free to throw it in the chat or unmute yourself for a second.
Yeah, coffee makes me pissed off a lot easier. That's for sure. Plus, like before, like I was doing like 2 or 3 energy drinks a day, plus like a liter of coffee as well, like to get myself going. So I feel bad for the poor apprentices. Like, how do I cut this? I'm like, what the fuck did you say to me? Like, yeah, definitely a lot calmer now. I start my mornings with meditation rather than a monster. So, yeah.
Nice, beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Mm.
Yeah, it's such a real thing. It is such a real thing. Bum, bum, bum. Looking at Rawa, not a coffee guy. Relate to some of the issues I have had. Okay, I hear you, brother. I hear you. Let's continue forward. Okay, again, just to highlight some of what I would call the worst offenders. Again, this is not me. I'm not a Puritan. I'm not someone who says you should never enjoy life, you should never use drugs, you should never drink. I'm not that person. I enjoy all those things from time to time. I'm what do you say, a conscious maximalist of indulgence in the right time and setting, and just making sure that I'm using it and it's not using me is my rule of thumb. But so some of the things that can be the most stressful or the worst offenders, I could put on here as well. It's just coming to me now, like detergents and chemical cleaners. You may have had the experience of walking through the aisle at a grocery store that's full of cleaners and having like an instant headache or feeling nauseous or feeling like, what the fuck? How do we think this is normal? This is like chemical valley I just walked through. That's your liver. That's your liver being like, get out of here. This is not a good place. And the more stressed your liver is, the more sensitive you tend to become to things like artificial scents and perfumes and detergents. But just here, worst offenders. So smoking, tobacco, cannabis, right? Even if it's organic, especially cannabis, if you're smoking it, cannabis is a strong chelator. I actually threw up a reel yesterday on this topic. It's a very strong chelator of whatever is in the soil where it's being grown. And so you can grow organic cannabis, but if the soil that is being grown on has things lingering from either past, 20, 30 years ago farming operations, or just has naturally occurring lead or cadmium or cesium or whatever those heavy metals might be, it's going to pull those things up and concentrate it into the flowers. And so we're then mainlining that stuff into our bodies, into our livers. Not a great scene, not a great thing to do perpetually or chronically. Alcohol, that's probably the most obvious one that we are all familiar with. Corn syrup, that tends to be like people who say sugar is sugar, right? All sugar is the same. All carbohydrates are bad for you. This is like the carnivore nonsense you see these days. You eating like a handful of organic berries is not the same as having corn syrup or having, highly processed chemical, refined sugars. They're not the same thing by any means. Both biochemically in terms of their arrangement, the arrangement of those molecules, but also what are they coming along with, right? You have the organic fruit, it's coming with structured water, it's coming with minerals, it's coming with vitamins. You have the refined white sugar, it's got none of that, right? So these are not the same thing. And the refined stuff is what's going to be most stressful. Staying up past 11. I've got a slide. The next slide will go into more depth there. Holding on to anger, resentment, frustration, right? Because it's two-way street, right? It's the body-mind or mind-body. It goes both ways. If you are super clean nutritionally, but your character, your ego structure is such that you never let things go, your liver is similarly going to hold on to that and be stressed. Even if you're drinking all the green juices and, taking the coffee enema and doing the infrared sauna and all that fun stuff, you're still going to have a degree of liver stress simply from the emotional influence. Again, coffee and energy drinks, and it's not just the caffeine, it's the dehydration, right? That is so, I will say, costly to our systems and to our liver's function. And then the last one I threw in there, and this is by no means a complete list, right? You could go online and find, oh, can't see the slides. Can't see the slides. How long has that been going on? Hold on. Can anyone else see the slides? Okay, Ryan can see the slides. It's just Don can't see the slides.
I'm looking at the one where it says the worst offenders for liver
Yeah.
gallbladder.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we're still rocking. Okay, perfect. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. So this is a Chinese medicine 24-hour clock. This is a very fun thing to look at and to study. And I'm just, for our purposes, going to zoom us in here to 11 p.m. And of course, these are not, hard and fast things. These are based on your circadian rhythm, right? So if you're in a place where you have perfectly, 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night, that's probably going to resemble this more closely. Now, of course, we have seasonality to our circadian rhythm in most places. So this isn't, it's not like from 10:59 to 11:01, you're like, oh shit, now I'm into, gallbladder time. What the hell? But the theme and the progression is accurate. And so if you're not sleeping during these times, those organs that are most active in doing their regeneration and doing their detoxification, which so much of that happens as we sleep, they're not going to do those things to the fullest capacity that they would otherwise. And so simply missing sleep for a prolonged period of time is going to create a backlog of toxicity, and it's going to slow down the functioning of those organs. And so, gallbladder time starting from 11 to 1, and then liver time 1 to 3. Also, something to be aware of on days, I know this is for myself for sure, on days, if I drink a bunch of alcohol, which I don't do regularly, and it's toward the later part of the day, like after dinner, I am very likely to wake up and feel quite stressed, like a cortisol hit sometime between 1 and 3 a.m. For me, it's usually like 2 to 3. And again, it's a direct correlation. The liver is stressed. The liver is trying to process this poison, this toxin that you had ingested earlier. And so it's waking you up with this shot of like stress hormones during that time because it is, struggling essentially to do what it's here to do. And it's trying to just get that stuff out of the system. And I mean, you could apply that to other things as well. If you're waking up at different times here and noticing that you feel unrested or just unable to get back to sleep, it can correspond with these different organs. And you'll see down here, morning time, time to eat, going through the day. It's really, again, I won't go into super depth here, but if you search on Google, Chinese medicine and clock, you'll see all of this. And I like down here, they've got, the harmonizing habits in terms of, I guess, a 5 a.m. start of the day, 5 to 7 a.m. starting the day, and a 11 p.m. winding down kind of thing, which I mean, I think for most of us, depending on our work, would be pretty ideal. I'm certainly not locked in all the time to my ideal sleep schedule, but when I am, my God, does everything work and feel way better. Okay, that's our clock. So what can we do to support? Again, I'm talking broad strokes here, big picture, easy, simple things to remember. The biggest one when it comes to food, if you just think green, bitter, sour. Green, bitter, sour. Don't have to all be at the same time, right? You can have just some bitter greens or just some, I don't know, spirulina or wheatgrass powder or some kind of bittery green. You don't have to have it at the same time, right? I know many of us are familiar with the idea of starting your day with lemon water or apple cider vinegar in water, something sour. Again, we're doing that to kickstart digestion and to support the liver and the gallbladder. Yeah, by all means, screenshot away. This is, I'm happy to share this as well. This is just a Canva, so I can share the slides as well. So don't stress out if you're trying to, capture the slides. But so green, bitter, sour, green, bitter, sour. You could do them together, and I'll have a little invitation / challenge at the end of this, which anchors that into our daily habits. But if from a food perspective, green, bitter, and sour are going to be the best thing to reach for. Okay. Cruciferous vegetables, that's all like the broccoli and the cauliflower and the cabbage and the kale and all those great things, many of which can and should be cooked, especially in the winter time, and we're not yet into summertime, because eating a ton of raw vegetables is typically pretty hard to do for most of us, especially like a ton of raw broccoli or something like that. So you want to steam that stuff or roast it or grill it or do whatever you got to do. Hydration, of course. Purified water, spring water, super essential. Never changes. It's the foundation of everything. As the song said, water is life, right? And that's very accurate in terms of our physiology. Down here, if you are a black tea or a coffee drinker, I like to have chai tea, half the days of the week or so. But if you really want to do some goodness for your liver, green and herbal teas would be the things to lean towards. You also find anytime you're doing a cleanse or a detox program, green and herbal tea are typically on the allowed list in terms of things that you might want to include for a little bit of support, a little bit of a boost. Again, warm water, warm lemon water, apple cider vinegar water in the AM. These are more, detox focused things. So dry brushing, that's a way to stimulate your lymphatic system. Rebounding also for lymphatic stimulation, and then sauna to sweat out those dreaded toxins that are building up in our bodies. I think, of course, the last one, going to bed early as the ideal way. Yes, questions, dry brushing, rebounding. So dry brushing, if you go on YouTube and type in how to dry brush, it's very much what it sounds like. Typically you use a natural fiber brush, like horsehair or pig hair, I think is what they use. And you're just rubbing the skin, kind of irritating the skin. It'll become red. It won't hurt or anything, but it'll become red. And you're pushing and moving lymphatic fluid, which is the I guess the major detoxifying fluid that takes stuff out of our bodies and helps to move that stuff, helps to circulate that fluid. And so you're just doing it in a way to move that stuff towards your center channel so that it can be, excuse me, processed and sort of, moved out and then eventually excreted through either urine or feces, the toxins from the lymph. That's what dry brushing is. There's great tutorials on YouTube. And then rebounding is basically jumping on a mini trampoline. Technically, a rebounder is one that has no springs. And so they use elastic bands to reduce the shock of landing on the surface of the little trampoline. So it's just easier on your joints. But you can do the same thing just bouncing on your toes, right? Imagine you're skipping without a rope. That would essentially be rebounding. Yeah, there's few things that are as accessible and effective for moving that fluid through the body as that motion. And yeah, Don, thank you. Swedish dry brushing. Specific direction that's recommended. Yeah, so you want to push things in a direction that's supporting your body's natural flow. Thank you for that. Okay. Those are the supports. We're going to dive in through a couple more pieces here, and then we'll open it up for discussion and questions. This is just a sort of a assembly of all kinds of delicious, nutritious greens and herbs and sour things. Warming things also can be really supportive for the liver and just for your digestive system in general. And so these are, if you had to come up with a list of really supportive things this is both for liver and gallbladder support, but it's also for the spring season. I should be clear. For the spring season, as we move from winter towards summer, we're in this transitionary phase where it's still cold, it's damp. That cold, the dampness can penetrate the body, can make us susceptible to allergies, to infections, to feeling a bit run down. And so making sure that we're having plenty of warming and nourishing and liver supporting foods is going to go a long way to getting us through the spring, feeling our best as we head towards the summer. In addition to foods and herbs, these would be nutrients from a supplementation point of view that are particularly supportive and supporting. And a lot of these you'll get from food. You don't have to go out and buy separate bottles of all these. And I wouldn't recommend it, doing that. But you can find liver complexes at a health food store. You can find specific programs, specific packages that cover all these bases and do so in a really kind of comprehensive manner. So it's like simpler. You're taking one formula instead of trying to take 10. And you're typically pairing that with a specific diet and lifestyle to really give yourself the most benefit in terms of liver support. I want to jump this one. Yeah, I think this one might be one of the most interesting. Let me just see here. You can't see my little reference down there. That's the website I found this part. But yeah, so emotional patterns. And again, this is Chinese medicine philosophy. Not all of it's necessarily going to be true in every case, but a lot of it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, these systems of looking at the body and understanding the body and understanding energy flow and the relation between an organ and an emotion and sort of character traits and personality is very well studied, right? This is like thousands and thousands of years of study and observation and reflection and experimentation to be able to distill it down and make it very accessible to us in the modern age. And so on the left here, we just have a bunch of what they would call stagnant or repressed liver chi, liver flow patterns. Again, anger, frustration, we talked about, depression, inability to forgive, irritability, lack of assertion, procrastination, trouble letting go of old habits or pain, lethargy, unfulfilled desires. Again, if you think about an inebriated, intoxicated general, he's probably going to be experiencing a bunch of these things. Lack of assertion, indecisiveness, can't decide what to do, right? Just kind of spinning his wheels. Versus the healthy flow patterns, right? A forgiving spirit, assertiveness, decisiveness, making decisions easily, right? Feeling good about our decisions as we're making them. An even temper, right? We're responding to things in a more appropriate way. when someone makes a mistake or someone asks us a question, we don't have to explode on them, right? As Josh shared in his previous life, we don't have to explode on them. We can just say, okay, I hear you, and let's deal with whatever's coming up accordingly. Feeling more fulfilled, feeling happier, more inspired, joyful, passionate, and being willing to let things go. Willingness to let go. And that's probably a very typical pattern if we've been there or we've seen people who have struggled with alcoholism, right? They're like, many times they're just so full of resentment and anger towards something. And that's what drives them to the habit, right? That becomes their mechanism, that becomes their self-soothing. And it's this really, vicious pattern that just continually reinforces itself. And at the same time, slowly or not so slowly, drains us and destroys our health and our vitality. Okay. So to start summarizing, and then I want to open for questions, then I have some discussion points. In terms of what we're taking away, what I would want you to take away from something like this, if you only took away like one thing, right? This is obviously more than one thing, but if you only took away a couple of things, these would be the things. These would be the easiest things to start with, unless you've got all this stuff dialed in and you're already eating, perfectly and sleeping perfectly and moving your body and staying hydrated. These would be the things to focus on, right? So food, again, bitter, green, sour, and seasonal, which I didn't mention explicitly, but it goes with the theme here. Bitter, green, sour, and seasonal. Movement, so just literally moving your body in any which way so that you can sweat and you can circulate lymph through your system. And then sleep. And again, there's that ideal for most of us in most cases at 11 p.m. Time to be asleep by then or sooner in order to get the most benefit from that recovery time. And then hydration versus overstimulation. Like, are you really tired or are you dehydrated? Right? Do you want to mix yourself up some lemon water and coconut water and some sea salt, or before reaching for, a pop or a coffee or a tea, right? Try it and see how you feel. Many times your brain just needs hydration. Same thing with like berries and apples and fruit. You can get that pop and that alertness and that awareness and awakeness that you're looking for without having to go to an actual stimulant. Got a question here. Well, a couple of things. So comment, Shane, saw a TCM specialist yesterday that's super tied to self-love, attracting good people. Oh, for the liver. Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, if we go back to these things, if someone is full of self-love, they're going to be on this side of the pattern, right? They're going to be more in this category versus over here. So that is very cool. Thank you for sharing that. And Josh there, how much water to drink per day? The rule that I was taught years ago, which is a pretty good rule to live by. This does not assume exercise or a lot of sweating. So if you're sweating a ton throughout your day, increase this, but half your body weight in pounds. So if I'm 180 pounds, half my body weight would be 90. And so 90 ounces, which if I do a quick little calculation here, is somewhere, I believe, between 2 and 3 liters. 90 ounces in liters. 2.55 liters for me. So whatever that is for you, right? Body weight, divide that by half. Body weight in pounds, divide that by half, and that's how many ounces you want to aim for at a minimum. Now, the way you can, I would include things like coconut water in that. It doesn't have to be just regular water. Coconut water, herbal tea, and you can get a lot of hydration from fruit, like cucumbers, apples, pears, and the water in fruit is structured water, which is more hydrating and full of minerals and vitamins. So it does a lot more for us than drinking, especially tap water, or even drinking filtered water, which has no minerals in it, like distilled or reverse osmosis water, which isn't that hydrating. It's good for detoxification purposes, but you want to add some minerals back into that if you're trying to hydrate yourself. So great question there. Continuing on here. So what's next? The 5-day Liver Love Challenge. I want to come up with something tangible that if anyone's inspired to take on and then report back their experience. And it's very simple. It's before basically 5 days of having something bitter or sour before a meal. So that could be you go to the health food store and you buy a little thing of St. Francis Canadian bitters or Swedish bitters, right? You pick your variety. I like Swedish myself, but you just buy a little bottle of tincture and then have a few droppers before your meal. Boom, you win the challenge. You give yourself that bitter stimulation. Your digestive system wakes up, your liver wakes up, your bile starts to squirt out, and if you deal with bloating, indigestion, these kinds of things, you're going to find that that little bit of bitter before your meal really helps to warm things up and smooth out the process of digestion. But this could be anything. This could be lemon water. This could be a shot of apple cider vinegar, a tincture, like I mentioned, greens powder, or it could be, say you have, I don't know, some organic rapini in your fridge, and you just take like a couple of leaves and chew on them right before you have your lunch, right? Just chew something bitter. It can literally be that simple. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for the comments there, Sid. Some people, there is what seems to be a genetic wiring for some individuals who are naturally more night owly. They're wired for staying up later. I'm not one of those people. It doesn't seem like most of us are those people. But again, we get into patterns and we make the most of our situation. Yeah, and then the water. That's a great. So I think I'm almost always dehydrated then. This is most people. This is the reality that we live in. Most people are walking around chronically dehydrated their entire lives, right? They don't know what it is to be fully hydrated because even if they do drink a ton of water, they're having like, 1 or 2 or 3 caffeinated drinks throughout the day, which are going to flush that water right out. And so it really is it really is something that can transform your life. When you are well slept, if you sleep early and you hydrate your body adequately, you will tend to have an energetic clarity and endurance that you've never known before, or maybe you haven't known since you were very young. Because it's, operating. I mean, think about it like this. If you had a car and you only ever gave it like half the amount of engine oil that it called for, how well do we think that car would run? Right? It would not run properly. It would eventually break down. It would probably be overheating and you'd have to pause. You'd have to pull over on the side of the road and take breaks all the time. Not a perfect analogy, but a pretty decent one in terms of if we're properly hydrated. What else do we have here? I hate going to bed and hate waking up. Working on that though. I love it. Yep, starts with shifting the dialogue. Binging on life. Do you recommend to stop meat during a liver cleanse? That's a great question. Let me come back to that. So here's our little liver love challenge. Is anyone inspired to take on the liver love challenge? Bitter, sour, something? Yeah. It's worth it. It's worth it. You can drop in the chat. You can drop in the chat if you are inspired. And again, if all you can do is go to the store and buy a lemon and squeeze like a quarter of a lemon in some water before you have your meal, done.